In the midst of the flood, a Marine heard a strange sound. He was about to ignore it until he realized it was the choked sob of a child who had been left behind. And the truth behind that cry would leave an entire town in stunned silence, not because of the storm, but because of what they had done. 3 days after Hurricane Barry, Kerrville, Texas, was no longer a town. It was a waterlogged wasteland, quieter than it had ever been. Water blanketed the streets, lapped at doorsteps. No car horns, no voices calling out, just the wind, and rooftops shredded like they had been through an invisible war with Mother Nature. Liam Walker stood still on the edge of a rescue boat as it glided through River Bend. Wind tugged at his worn rain jacket. His salt and pepper hair was soaked, clinging to his forehead, but he didn't bother brushing it back. Liam was 39, a former Marine who had served in some of the most volatile corners of the Middle East. After retiring, he chose a quiet life in Austin, far from the noise and far from the memory of the little daughter he lost 3 years ago due to a hospital's fatal mistake. When the hurricane hit Texas, Liam volunteered not to be a hero, but simply because he couldn't bear the thought of another child being left behind, with no one coming back for them. Left side house number 49, marked as evacuated. Move on. Rick, the boat operator and fellow responder, asked, glancing at the map. Liam nodded but kept his eyes fixed on the house. A one-story wooden home, almost fully submerged up to the windows. The porch sagged. The swing on the front beam still swayed slightly in the floodwaters, motionless, as if waiting for someone who would never return. As they passed by, Liam heard something. He tilted his head. A faint sound, then nothing. He rose to his feet. Rick frowned. "What is it?" Liam didn't answer right away. He listened again, then turned sharply. "I heard crying. A child." Rick waved a hand, probably echoing. "That place was cleared out yesterday. Could be a cat." Liam held his gaze for just a second, then without a word, grabbed his life vest and jumped into the water. The cold hit him instantly waist deep, pulling hard. Mud churned around his legs as the current fought him. He moved slowly, carefully, eyes locked on the silent house. Outside, everything looked still. But deep inside, a sound was screaming to be heard. He edged along the side of the house toward the back door. The wooden door was shut, but not locked. He twisted the knob stuck. He stepped back, braced himself, set his shoulder, and rammed forward with all his weight. A loud thud echoed across the water. The door burst open and the flood rushed in as if it had been waiting 3 days for someone to let it in. The first thing that hit him was the smell-soured milk and mildew, a stench you couldn't mistake for anything else. It was the smell of things forgotten. He flicked on his flashlight. The beam cut through a thin mist hanging in the house. Water had risen past the kitchen cabinets. Chairs floated aimlessly. A child's workbook drifted along the baseboard, and there on the floor lay a headless doll, face down, like it too had been waiting to be picked up. A cry, this time clearer, weaker, but unmistakable. It came from the end of the hallway, behind a door blocked by a heavy wooden armchair. Whoever pushed that chair up against the door hadn't done it by accident. Liam stepped forward. "Is someone in there?" His voice was low but steady. Silence. Then a faint, broken sob. He set the flashlight on a shelf and used both hands to drag the chair aside. It was heavy, damp, and caked in mud. It scraped across the floor with a sound like claws dragging through wood. He grabbed the doorknob. Stuck, but not locked. He braced himself and shoved. Cold water surged out like a slap, nearly knocking him off balance. It was a small room, no windows. A wooden dresser leaned crooked in the center, and on top of it, a boy, about 5 years old. His eyes were swollen, skin pale and bluish. He clutched a threadbare stuffed bunny to his chest. His whole body trembled with every tiny breath. He wasn't crying anymore, just stared at Liam with hollow, sunken eyes that looked like they had cried out everything they had, for someone who never came back. Liam stood frozen for a moment, then pulled off the soaked army shirt under his life vest and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders. It hung loosely, almost swallowing his small frame, but it still held warmth. The boy didn't speak, didn't pull away. He just curled up inside the shirt, still hugging the old bunny, leaning against Liam like he was the last solid thing left in the world. The boy whispered, barely audible. Mum said to wait. She'd come back. The words cut through Liam like a blade. He nodded gently. She will. But right now I'm here. And we need to get out of here, okay? When they reached the door, Rick was waiting. His eyes widened when he saw Liam carrying the boy. What the hell? Nobody said there was a kid in that house. Liam didn't answer. He just stood there, holding the boy. His hands still shook, not from the cold, but from something deeper. Anger. Who had blocked that door? Who had left a child in a windowless room, trapped in floodwater? He turned to look at the house one last time. The floor was sinking, and the same wooden chair that had barricaded the door still floated nearby in the hallway untouched. It hadn't been washed there by the flood. It had been placed there, deliberately. And Liam knew this wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, a cruel one. And he would be the first gas, "Tumutu sama why?" He didn't yet know that this one question would lead him to a truth so devastating it would leave him speechless when he finally uncovered it. The boy in Liam's arms felt strangely light. Not the typical lightness of a child, but the weightlessness of a body that had never truly been cared for. His small arms still clutched a stuffed rabbit, as if it were the last living thing in a world that was slowly drowning. Liam moved down the slick hallway, his tactical boots caked with mud, his heart pounding heavily in his chest. Rick led the way, flashlight sweeping ahead. The back door was still wide open, water tapping rhythmically at the edge of the porch. Nurse Carol waited by the rescue boat, holding a thermal blanket and a first aid kit. When she saw Liam carrying the child, she froze for a split second, then quickly laid the blanket open. "Lay him down here." Liam gave a slight nod, bent down, and gently placed the boy in Carol's arms. The child still hadn't let go of the stuffed rabbit. Water seeped from his clothes into the blanket, soaking it fast. Rick stood nearby, watching the boy for a moment before turning to Liam, his voice lowered. "You sure about this?" There were no reports of a kid in there. Liam kept staring back at the house behind them. His voice was quiet, firm. "I'm sure." And that chair blocking the door, it wasn't pushed by the water. Someone put it there on purpose. The team fell silent. Carol radioed in a request for emergency medical transport. Liam remained where he stood, his hand trembling slightly, not from the cold. In his mind was the image of the room he had just come from, stifling, heavy with mildew, and carrying something that clung to you. "Rick," he said softly, "I want to check that room again." "You think someone else might be in there?" Rick asked, narrowing his eyes. "I'm not sure, but I need to know." Liam paused, to be certain it wasn't accidental. He turned and stepped back inside the house. The water had receded a little, but still came up nearly to his knees. The kitchen looked just as it had before, floating debris, scattered, cold, with that sharp stench. Liam shone his flashlight across the floor. No footprints, no drag marks, nothing at all. As if the house had cut itself off from the rest of the world. He returned to the door, the one that had been blocked by the wooden chair. The chair now floated in the hallway, turned sideways. A piece of the backrest was chipped, the break fresh. He knelt down to inspect it closely. On the wooden surface were fingerprints. Faint, but visible. Small, The kind only a child would leave, pressed hurriedly while still soaking wet. Liam opened the door and stepped inside. The room was barely 3 square meters. No windows, no bed, no chair. Just a tipped-over kitchen cabinet, right where the boy had been curled up moments earlier. Liam raised his flashlight. On the wall to the right, smudged red crayon markings came into view. A simple house, a son, a tall adult with long arms, and next to them, a smaller figure with no face. Liam stood still. The boy had once tried to draw his world, but no one had ever asked. Liam leaned in. There were words, childlike handwriting, repeated over and over across 3 of the walls. "I've been good. I waited. Connie doesn't like me. Mom went to get milk. She'll come back." The name Connie appeared several times. Some words were crossed out. In places, the scribbles were stabbed so many times the crayon lines turned violent. Liam took a step back. The flashlight swept across the corner of the room and caught something small, glinting. He knelt down and picked it up, a paper bracelet, rolled, tied with a rubber band. The ink was smeared but still legible. Stepchild, no priority. He stood frozen for a few seconds. It was handmade, not medical, not the kind hospitals give out, not a toy either. It had been made. On purpose. Liam tightened his grip around the bracelet, then looked up and scanned the room again. This wasn't a storm shelter. It was a holding cell. Liam stepped out of the house. The door creaked shut behind him, like sealing something unspeakable inside. The late afternoon light cast a cold, pale orange glow across the flooded neighborhood. Rick stood in the boat, gripping the rail, his eyes filled with confusion. "That room," Liam said hoarsely, his voice slow and deliberate, "wasn't where the boy slept. It was where they removed him from the rest of the world." Rick furrowed his brow. "You serious?" Liam didn't answer right away. He raised his hand, holding the small bracelet he'd just found beneath the moldy mattress. The faded lettering was still readable. "Stepchild, no priority." Rick stared, then took a step back. His face changed. "Jesus, who could do something like that to a kid?" Liam said nothing. He looked down and brushed the mud off his boots. Only one question echoed in his mind now. Who was Connie? And how could a child exist yet no one in this neighborhood, no one in the system even remembered? Overhead, the whir of helicopters returned. The floodwaters hadn't receded, but beneath that water, something else was rising. Not a body. The truth. Liam turned toward the rescue center, where the boy was being taken for evaluation. He didn't yet know the child's name, but he knew one thing with certainty. That boy had been deliberately left behind. And if no one turns back today, tomorrow, we may leave another child to drown. The white ambulance roared down the muddy road, carrying the boy out of the flooded zone. Liam stood still, watching it disappear, his hand still clutching the crumpled paper wristband. Every scribbled letter on it screamed inside his head, and the boy's final words still echoed in his ears. "Mama told me to wait." The field clinic had been hastily set up in the courtyard of an elementary school on a hill, just above where the floodwaters had reached. The tents were thrown up quickly, extension cords strung haphazardly, nurses rushing back and forth. But the air inside felt cold. Not from the temperature, but from indifference. As Liam stepped in, Carol, the nurse who had received Oliver from the rescue boat, motioned to him. "He's awake, stable, no fever, but emotionally, not doing great. He hasn't said a word since we wrapped him in a blanket." Liam nodded slightly, his eyes moving toward the cot in the corner of the tent. Oliver lay there, still as a pebble in the chaos, his gaze vacant, staring into nothing. The stuffed rabbit rested on his chest like a final shield between him and the world. He didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't react, just clutched the rabbit's ears tightly, as if holding on to a promise no one had yet fulfilled. "Has anyone come for him?" Liam asked. Carol shook her head. "No name in the records, no calls, no visitors." Liam slowly stepped closer, crouched beside the cot, and spoke in a voice so soft it sounded like he was talking to himself. "What's your name, sweetheart? Do you remember your mama's name?" He paused, hoping for a nod. Oliver looked at him. He didn't look away, but he didn't answer either. He simply pulled the blanket higher and buried half his face into the rabbit. Liam tried again, his voice slower this time, warmer. "Where's your home? Is there someone you want to see?" The boy's brow furrowed, like he was trying to reach for something the flood had swept away. His lips moved, but only one word came out, barely a whisper, like wind skimming across water. "Connie." "Is Connie your sister?" Liam asked, leaning in a little closer. Liam pulled out his phone and opened the evacuation list issued to the rescue team. Riverbend neighborhood, 2nd zone, house number 49th. Registered for evacuation, Mitch Sanders, accompanied by one child, female, Connie Sanders. He flipped to the next page and examined the recorded evacuation time carefully. Evacuated at 9:17 a.m., July 6th. He checked his watch. Oliver had been pulled out of that same house at 2 p.m. that same day. He muttered a curse under his breath. That wasn't accidental. There was no way it was just a coincidence. Rick stepped into the tent carrying a water bottle. Still thinking about that case, Liam pointed at the list. Mitch Sanders. A girl was evacuated with him. No one named Oliver. Rick furrowed his brow. Maybe a distant relative? Or the boy belonged to a neighbor? The boy was in that house, locked in a room. He had a wristband that clearly read, "Stepchild." Not a priority. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. Why would anyone even make a wristband like that? Rick said nothing. He knew Liam had lost a child. He knew that when Liam said he didn't believe, something deeper was pushing to the surface. Liam grabbed the file and stepped out of the tent. He needed to match names. He needed to see faces. The evacuation shelter was 3 tents down, where hundreds were huddled in the heat and the stale scent of reheated rice. Each person had carved out a corner for themselves, a tiny world born after the chaos. He handed a photo to the security officer. "I need to speak with Mitch Sanders and his daughter. They were evacuated from Riverbend." Tent 14. Liam lifted the tarp. Inside, the pale yellow light from a ceiling bulb fell onto a scene that made his chest tighten. A small family sat around a plastic table, eating cup noodles. The middle-aged man wore khakis, a clean blue polo, neatly trimmed hair, still smelling of fresh aftershave. Next to him, a girl around 14, long brown hair, casually munching on chips while scrolling through TikTok like the world outside hadn't just been swallowed by mud and screams. Not a speck of dirt on them. Nothing about them said disaster survivors. Liam stood there for a few seconds. His temples throbbed. These were the people who got rescued in the morning, prioritized, logged in, wrapped in blankets, and transported here through the full weight of the system. And that boy, alone, blue-lipped, unnamed, was left behind like some worthless object in a dark room. He clenched his fists. If not for the badge on his chest, he would have shouted. Liam stepped forward and asked, "Are you Mitch Sanders?" The man looked up, a hint of caution in his eyes. "I'm Mitch. Is something wrong?" "You live in Riverbend, right?" "Yes." "What's going on?" Liam looked over at the girl. "Is your daughter's name Connie?" She didn't look up from her phone. "Yeah." Liam pulled out a crumpled paper wristband and gently laid it on the table. 2 people left that house that morning, but later that same day, My rescue team found a little boy about 5 years old left behind in a windowless room, alone, wearing this. Mitch froze. Connie stopped scrolling. "Do you know that child?" Liam asked. His voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. Mitch cleared his throat, avoiding Liam's eyes. I thought my wife had already picked him up. I wasn't sure if he was home. The flood came fast. Everything got chaotic." "Who is the boy to you?" Liam pressed. Mitch let out a slow breath. "Oliver. He's Jamie's son. My wife's boy from before. I don't want to drag family matters into this." Liam cut him off, his voice cold as steel. "The issue is, your wife's son was locked alone in a small room. No exit, no light, not even a mention of him on the evacuation list. And for the entire morning, no one went looking for him." Connie spoke up, calm and cold. "He's not my brother." The sentence dropped like a cold gust, slicing through the Texas summer. Liam turned his head slowly, locking eyes with her. Connie didn't blink. That same cold, vacant stare, the kind no 14-year-old should ever wear. He looked back at Mitch. "You can call this chaos, sir, but from where I'm standing, it looks an awful lot like a choice." Mitch clenched his fists, glancing around the tent as if hoping someone might interrupt. No one did. Liam bent down, picked up the wristband again. "The boy survived," he said, voice low. "And he's invisible no more." He walked out of the tent without waiting for a reply. As the canvas flap fell shut behind him, Connie's eyes met his uncertain, confused, and for the first time, aware that she had seen something she wasn't supposed to see. The phone screen still glowed in her hand, but her finger no longer touched it. No one inside that tent could pretend they didn't know anymore. Liam returned to the coordination tent after the brief encounter with Connie and Mitch. The feeling in his chest was no longer doubt. It was something tighter, colder, like a rope slowly tightening around someone's neck. Not an accident, not chaos, but a deliberate selection. He didn't speak to Rick the entire way back. His hand still clutched the crumpled slip of paper, the wristband with smeared, water-blurred handwriting. Stepchild. No priority. The temporary relief station had grown noisier by late afternoon. A group of reporters had arrived. Locals lined up for meal rations. Children played on the wet grass with makeshift paper kites. That seemingly harmless bustle only made Liam feel more unsettled. As he passed the community update area, his eyes caught a television screen perched on a plastic folding table. It was replaying an interview with a surviving family from the flood, clearly showing Mitch in a light blue polo, smiling politely. Next to him was Connie, introduced as his biological daughter. They sat side by side, speaking about togetherness and the lessons of family. Liam stood still, staring straight into Mitch's eyes through the camera lens as the man said, "We lost everything, but having each other, that's what matters most." The words tightened something in Liam's chest. He turned away, pulled out his phone, and flipped through the evacuation roster once more. Mitch Sanders, clearly recorded as having left home at 9:17 a.m. Connie marked as present. But Oliver nowhere in any of the records. He began asking the rescue workers assigned to the Riverbend sector for information about the Sanders family. One worker said, "That household had 2 kids, but only the girl was with the father that day." A neighbor named Janice recalled, "Oliver? That tiny boy? I didn't see his mother at all that day. Word is he lived with his birth mom and a stepfather. His real dad passed away a long time ago." Miss Jamie? Janice, who lived next door, frowned. "I saw her driving out of that breakfast place. After that, nothing. Someone said a car skidded off near Route 9, but with the heavy rain, no one dared go close." Each word, each small detail, nudged Liam closer to something unforgivable. That afternoon, when Liam arrived at the medical area, he was surprised to see Oliver sitting alone under the awning, still clutching the stuffed rabbit against his chest. Carol stood nearby and whispered, "He asked to go outside for a while, but he hasn't said a word. No crying, no calling out for anyone." Liam walked over and sat beside the boy. They stayed quiet for a while. "Oliver," he asked gently, "where's your mum?" The boy didn't answer right away. He just held the rabbit tighter, his eyes still fixed on the ground. After a moment, he shook his head softly. "I don't know. That day, she wasn't home." "Then who was with you?" "Just Uncle Mitch and Connie." Liam held his breath. He didn't ask anything more. The boy had said enough. When Liam returned to the command tent, he found Rick talking with Raymond, the sheriff. Liam pulled them both aside and laid everything out. No one can confirm that Oliver was ever evacuated. The room was locked from the outside, no escape route. And this bracelet. He placed the bracelet on the table. Raymond nodded. "I'll request to open a file. But if you want this to stick, you'll need a clear statement from the child, or at least some evidence that Mitch deliberately left him behind." Liam said nothing. Then he pulled out his phone and opened the emergency team's footage from that morning. He slowed down the frames. Mitch boarding the boat with Connie. No Oliver. The house door still wide open. Without waiting any longer, Liam decided to contact Child Protective Services and arrange to have Oliver removed from the temporary camp and brought to a safer center. Nurse Carol agreed. "That boy shouldn't be handed back to anyone until we know exactly what happened." Later that afternoon, as the wind began to shift and the sky faded to a pale grey, Liam stood by the fence, watching Connie as she stood alone, absent-mindedly fidgeting with her sleeve. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she didn't look away. That look held no hostility, only fear. But within it, Liam found what he needed, an unspoken confirmation. The air no longer felt still. It had begun to stir like the first breeze before a coming storm. And this time, it wasn't rain on the horizon. It was the truth, waiting to be named. 2 days after the confrontation at the evacuation site, Kerrville was finally starting to dry out. The floodwaters had receded, but the stillness that followed brought no peace. Across the front pages, headlines began to spread about. "The boy left behind in the flood zone," often with the subheading, "Oliver, the boy whose name wasn't on any list." Liam sat at a wooden table behind the relief tent, going over the words he had overheard from a neighbor. He opened his laptop and began searching for basic information. According to the tax records Rick had managed to pull, Jamie worked at a small diner on the outskirts of town. The last confirmed sighting of her was the morning of the flood, July 6th at 9:50 a.m., when she finished her early shift and left the diner to go home. No one had seen her since. Liam started calling every hospital within a 50-mile radius, cross-referencing the emergency admissions list from July 6th. It wasn't until that morning that a match finally turned up. An unidentified woman admitted to Mercy North Hospital with multiple injuries sustained in a car crash while trying to return home during the rising floodwaters. She'd been rescued just in time by a passing motorist. The photo confirmed it. It was Jamie Marsh. Liam sat in silence. So she'd come back. She had tried to return for Oliver. She hadn't abandoned him after all. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. A part of his doubt had just been cleared away. But what Mitch had done that now stood out more clearly than ever. It took Liam over half an hour to drive to the hospital. The medical ward was on the 3rd floor, with milky white hallways, the sharp smell of disinfectant, and flickering fluorescent lights that strained the eyes. He knocked gently on the door of room 312, then pushed it open. Jamie Marsh was lying on her side, hair matted to the pillow, an IV in her arm. A long stitched wound ran along her temple. Next to the bed sat a pair of mud-caked rubber shoes, perhaps the only thing that remained from that fateful morning. She stirred slightly at the sound of the door. Liam stood in the doorway, one hand still resting on the knob, as if weighing every step. "Jamie Marsh." His voice was calm, but his eyes were filled with guarded suspicion. Jamie opened her eyes and tried to push herself up. "I'm Jamie. And you are—" Liam stepped closer, pulled out a printed photo, and laid it on the bed. "Do you recognize this house?" Jamie stared at the photo, a house at 49 Riverbend, floodwaters lapping at the doorstep. She jolted upright, panic flooding her face. "Oliver! Oh my God! Where's Oliver? Where's my son? The boy's alive. I got him out of the locked room. The door was shut, and the water was nearly up to his neck." Jamie leaned back, as if a portion of the guilt she'd been carrying for days had just been lifted off her shoulders, her fingers clenched tightly around the edge of the blanket, her eyes clouding with tears. I called Mitch my husband. I told him to pick up both Connie and Oliver. I tried to get home before the flood hit, but there were trees down everywhere. One of them fell on me, and they brought me here." Liam stared at her, his voice sharpened with suspicion. "Why did you have to emphasize both kids? That should have been a given, shouldn't it?" Jamie stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then she slowly shook her head and pulled a cracked but still lit phone from the drawer. Her hand trembled as she opened the voice memo. She hit play. Her own voice came through, rushed, carried by the howl of the wind. "Mitch, listen. I can't get through. The road's blocked. Please, pick up Connie and Oliver, okay? Don't leave Oliver at home, he's scared of the dark. Mitch, can you hear me? Mitch?" Liam listened without a flicker of expression, but his eyes darkened. Jamie took a shaky breath, still staring at the screen. "I had to say it out loud because, to them, Oliver was never really part of the family. Connie kept her distance, and Mitch always had an excuse to leave him out. I used to think maybe it was just unfamiliarity, but then the dinners without a plate for him, the trips where he'd be dropped off at the neighbors. I started to see it." Liam gave a small nod. "And you stayed." "I didn't have much choice back then. I was a single mum working 3 shifts at the plastics factory. I thought at least he'd have a family, a shared last name, a roof. I endured it, thinking that as long as I was there, I could protect him." Jamie turned to him, eyes filled with regret. "But I was wrong. I never thought they'd actually leave him, not in the middle of a flood." Liam gently tightened his grip on the phone and nodded. "You didn't abandon your child, but someone else made sure it looked that way." He looked at Jamie. She wasn't crying anymore, just still. "I left my son," she whispered, "with someone who never saw him as their own. I thought, at least he was an adult. At least, he was the father." She looked up at Liam. "Did he say anything?" Liam nodded slowly. "He said you told him to wait, and he did, for 3 days." Jamie covered her face with both hands. "I should have gone to get him myself. I never should have trusted." "Don't." Liam interrupted, his voice not quite gentle, but firm. "Your son is alive, and what you just told me, it's the key to getting him out of the hands of someone who doesn't deserve him." Jamie looked at him, her voice weary. "Who are you? Why are you doing all this?" Liam didn't answer right away. He just stared out the window, where a thin ray of sunlight fell across the scratched glass sill. "I once had a daughter," he said quietly. "She was 5, too. One day, the hospital told me they forgot to monitor her heartbeat for 4 hours. I couldn't save her, but I can save this boy." Jamie's voice trembled I'm going to find my son. No matter who's holding him, I'll get him back. Liam gave a slight nod. I'll go with you. At that very moment, in another corner of Kerrville, journalist Nora Blake's first article went live. The headline read in bold letters, "Oliver, the boy not on the list." And beneath it, the subheading, "In the chaos of natural disaster, some children aren't just left behind by the flood, but by their families, the system, and the silence of adults." Kerr County Police Headquarters, the following morning. The air inside was heavy, like rain that hadn't fallen yet. The old ceiling fans turned slowly. The smell of strong coffee mixed with damp paperwork. Liam sat across from Sheriff Raymond Cook in a small office crowded with case files. A slightly crooked portrait of the president hung on the wall, the corner of its frame peeling away. Raymond wore a button-down shirt with the top button undone. His eyes were ringed with fatigue, but his gaze remained sharp, like someone long used to managing public pressure. "I just got back from the hospital. Jamie's awake," Liam began. "She recorded the call from the night of the flood. She clearly told Mitch to pick up both Connie and Oliver. There was no misunderstanding." Raymond nodded slowly. "I heard it. The recording's clean. No cuts. But it's one-sided. Mitch could still claim he didn't hear her clearly. And the law doesn't punish someone for ignoring what they hear unless there's hard proof of intent." Liam leaned forward. "You're saying leaving a child in a windowless room tagged with a bracelet that reads, 'Stepchild low priority,' completely forgotten for 3 days, that's not clear enough." Raymond folded his arms. "I'm saying if we want this in court, we'll need more. A failed evacuation protocol, a first-hand witness. And the truth is, this case is already making some people uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" Liam let out a bitter laugh. "A child almost drowned because the adults around her walked away. And you're worried about making some people uncomfortable?" Raymond looked him straight in the eye. He was tired, but not evasive. "There's pressure from above, and some in the media want to spin this as a family shattered by panic during a natural disaster. They don't want the stepfather portrayed as a villain." "I'm not saying I agree, I'm telling you what you're up against." Liam stood. "Then I'll find the evidence myself. Are you willing to sign a subpoena for a witness?" Raymond hesitated. "If there's cause." "Who?" "Connie." Later that same afternoon, Liam stood leaning against the frame of the medical tent, hands in the pockets of his coat, eyes quietly observing. From a distance, a small figure approached Connie. The girl looked around hesitantly, then lowered her head and pulled a small, sealed carton of milk from her jacket pocket. Her hand trembled slightly as she stepped inside the tent, moving toward the bedside, where Oliver lay fast asleep. Gently, she placed the milk next to his pillow, then reached out to smooth his hair with the lightest touch so soft, it was as if she feared she might wake him. Then she turned and hurried out. "You still care about him," Liam said as Connie stepped outside. She froze, startled. There was no anger in his voice, no blame in his eyes. He simply stood there, calm and steady. Connie lowered her head. A heavy silence fell between them. I just wanted to know if he was okay," she whispered. "I know," Liam replied, nodding gently. "What happened, Connie?" She didn't answer right away. Only after they had moved to a stone bench behind the tent, away from foot traffic, did she speak quietly. "The day before the flood, my mum got stuck at the factory. She called home. I heard her. She told my dad to pick up both me and Oliver. But when it was time to leave, he only grabbed me. I asked where Oliver was. He said, 'Taking the daughter is enough.'" Liam stayed silent. His heart beat heavier with each word. He never liked Oliver, said he wasn't blood. I used to think he was just grumpy. But then, the times he made Oliver leave the dinner table or left him home when we went on family trips. I started to get it. She turned her face away, her voice caught in her throat. He said if it was just me, things would be easier, less of a burden. And that day, he gave me a slip of paper, told me to write, "Stepchild, no priority," said it would make things simpler for rescue teams. I thought, if I didn't write it, he'd do something worse. I was scared. I thought, it was just one sentence. No one would see it. I didn't know I'd be the reason he was left behind. Liam placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Adults are real good at making kids believe it's their fault. But the truth is, the fault lies with the ones who are supposed to protect you. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a dried-up blue marker, placing it in Liam's hand. This is what I used. I didn't know what else to do. I was scared. I couldn't say no to him. Liam looked at her, his eyes steady, calm, but deep down, a quiet fury rose inside him, not at the girl sitting before him, but at the man who had used a child as a tool for abandonment. "You did the right thing coming here," Liam said softly. "Not everyone who becomes a father deserves to be one. But you still have the chance not to become like him." Connie pressed her lips together. Tears welled in her eyes. Then, with the faintest nod, she agreed. That afternoon, Raymond held the first press conference. Reporters packed the hallway of the police headquarters. Liam stood behind the row of microphones. He hadn't planned to speak, but when Raymond invited him to step forward, he didn't decline. He walked up, looked at the crowd, not angry, but resolute. "I'm not here to talk about laws," he began. "I'm here because I was the first person to open that door. And the first thing I saw wasn't water, it wasn't mud. It was a 5-year-old child sitting on the kitchen counter, shivering, waiting for his mother. No one had called his name. No one had listed him anywhere. No one had reported him missing. He held up a crumpled bracelet to the cameras. And he was wearing this something that said he didn't matter. A reporter called out, "Do you think this is just a personal family issue?" Liam didn't hesitate. "I think this is an issue for all of us. When a system allows a child to disappear and no one speaks up, it's no longer a family matter. It's complicity." He looked directly into the lens. "We're talking about a child, not about whose name he carries. And if tomorrow there's another child like him, who among us will turn away?" 2 days after the flood, the water finally began to recede from the temporary evacuation camp. Jamie hadn't been officially discharged from the hospital yet, but that didn't stop her. The moment she heard that Oliver was at a rehabilitation center near the base, she signed the self-discharge form and left the hospital, her legs still bandaged, but her eyes shining like they'd never known what it meant to be broken. She arrived at the camp around noon. Carol, the nurse, had just stepped out of the tent when she saw Jamie staggering toward her. "I need to see my son, please," Jamie said, almost pleading, her whole body trembling with emotion. Oliver was coloring something with crayons when Carol opened the tent flap. He turned around. 1 second, 2 seconds, then he shot to his feet. "Mom!" It wasn't loud, but it rang out like a bell, shattering every ounce of silence. Jamie dropped to her knees, arms wide open, and Oliver ran into them, wrapping himself around her, arms tight, face buried in the front of her hospital gown. He cried not with sound, but with trembling little shoulders. In his arms, he still clutched the worn-out stuffed bear, its fur matted from floodwater, one ear nearly torn off. But he wouldn't let go. He held it to his chest like it carried a piece of his soul. Jamie knelt there, stroking his head, whispering broken words. "I'm here now. I'm so sorry. I'm here." Oliver looked up, eyes shimmering with tears, his voice cracking like it had to fight its way out of his throat. held it, because you gave it to me. On my birthday. Last year. You said you picked it because it knows how to listen. So I thought, if I kept holding it, you'd hear it and come back. Jamie broke down. She hugged him tighter, his head nestled against her collar, his hand still gripping the bear. In the middle of all the chaos, he had held on to hope with the very gift she'd given him. Liam stood at a distance, not wanting to intrude on the moment. But when Jamie looked up, her eyes met his. She gave a small nod, then gestured that she wanted to speak in private. In the relief staff area, Jamie sat on a wooden bench and pulled a thin envelope from her jacket pocket. "This is a recording from 3 months ago," she said, placing it on the table. "Mitch said, word for word, 'One good little girl is enough. That boy's just a nuisance.' I recorded it during a fight because I knew one day I'd need it." Liam went still. Jamie continued, her voice steady. "I don't just want custody of Oliver. I want to take Connie too. She's not bad. She's just been taught wrong. And I won't let her grow up to become a version of her father." She clenched her hands, her eyes red, but no longer wavering. "I know you're a good man, but I'm scared that involving you will hurt you. Your reputation, your job. I understand all that. But as a mother, I'm willing to risk everything to protect my children. All I ask is that you help." Liam looked at Jamie, not as the woman who had cried over losing her child, but as the mother who stood up, even with trembling legs. He nodded. "I'll do whatever I can." Kerr County Courthouse wasn't used to hosting crowds, but that morning, every seat was taken. The press section was packed with reporters. Outside, citizens held signs, "Protect Oliver" and "Justice for the Nameless Children." Liam entered the courtroom with Jamie. She wore a simple white blouse, her hair pulled back neatly. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. Oliver was brought in through a private entrance, accompanied by a child psychologist. He wore a grey hoodie and clutched a stuffed rabbit to his chest, seated quietly in the witness room for minors behind a pane of frosted glass. Across the courtroom, Mitch sat beside his attorney, Mr. Langston, a silver-haired man in a sharply pressed suit who didn't take his hand off the paperwork. Mitch remained silent, occasionally glancing around the room as if this were just another PTA meeting. Judge Albert Dole entered. The room stood. Once he took his seat, the only sound was 3 firm strikes of the gavel. Then silence. "This hearing is convened to review the petition for legal custody of minor Oliver Marsh," the judge announced, his voice low and measured, "as well as allegations of child endangerment due to abandonment during a life-threatening event." Attorney Kate Morgan, representing Jamie, stepped forward. "Your Honor, we'd like to begin with an audio recording taken from my client Jamie Marsh's phone on the morning of the flood. This clip has not been edited and has been verified by the investigative team." The courtroom fell silent. The recording played. Jamie's voice came through, choked and urgent. "Mitch, listen to me. I can't get out. The road is blocked. Please get both Connie and Oliver, okay? Don't leave Oliver at home. He's afraid of the dark. Mitch, are you hearing me? Mitch!" Then the sound of the call cutting off. No response. Kate stopped the playback. "And this," she continued, changing the slide, "is footage from a traffic intersection camera showing Mr. Mitch Sanders leaving the house at 9:17 a.m. While the front door was still open, a large monitor lit up in the center of the courtroom. The footage was crystal clear, Mitch piloting a rescue boat away from the dock. Connie sat in the back, huddled under a raincoat. There was no sign of Oliver, no second child, not even a backward glance. Liam rose from his seat, his voice steady and firm. He didn't check the house. He didn't call out for Oliver. He didn't ask anyone to go back. He just left. Kate, now speaking on behalf of the Department of Child Services, approached holding up a clear evidence bag. "And this," she said, lifting it for the room to see, is the wristband found on Oliver's arm when the rescue team located him inside a locked room, etched with the words, "Stepchild, no priority." She paused, then switched to the next image, an overhead shot of the scene, followed by a close-up of the rescue team breaking down the door. Behind that door wasn't just a lock. It was blocked by a nearly 150-pound sofa wedged tightly to prevent anyone on the inside from getting out. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Jamie buried her face in her hands. Connie gasped for air. Kate concluded, "Your Honor, this could not have been accidental. This is clear evidence of a deliberate act of isolation and abandonment of a child at the exact time a Level 4 storm warning had been issued." A photo of the wristband appeared, enlarged and projected across the room. It read, "Stepchild, no priority." The room buzzed with whispers, and we have sworn testimony from Mr. Mitch Sanders' own daughter, Connie Sanders, stating that she wrote that line at her father's request. Mitch shifted in his seat, his face flushed red. Attorney Langston rose immediately. "Your Honor, the defense categorically denies all allegations. Mr. Sanders misheard the instructions during the emergency call and acted on instinct in a high-stress situation. He didn't see Oliver in the house. He had no intention of abandoning anyone. As for the wristband, this could easily be the result of a foolish prank by a child. It should not be used as the basis to indict a father during such chaotic circumstances." Judge Dole remained silent. "Proceed." Langston looked toward Oliver, still seated behind the glass. "We consent to allow the boy to answer one single question as requested by the plaintiff." Jamie stood up. Liam glanced at her. She was trembling, but she stepped forward to the witness stand, eyes fixed straight on her son behind the glass. Jamie swallowed hard. "Do you think someone might come back?" The boy nodded, lips pressed together. "Who do you think will come back?" Oliver looked at his mother, then whispered into the microphone, "You told me to wait." The courtroom fell utterly silent, as if every sound had been swallowed up. Judge Dole looked up, his face frozen. Jamie blinked, then quickly spoke. "No, I never said that. I never told Oliver anything like that." Then, as if pushed into a memory, she turned urgently to the attorney. Kate Morgan gave a small nod and stepped forward. "We reviewed Oliver's old phone. There was a deleted voice message that we recovered from a backup. It was a male voice, not Jamie's." She pressed play. The audio came through the speakers. "Stay in the room. Don't go anywhere. Mum said you have to wait right there. Just lie still. Rescue will come." Jamie shook her head, panic in her eyes. "That wasn't me. That was Mitch's voice. He mimicked mine. That's how he kept the boy from leaving." Kate turned back to the judge. "We believe Mr. Mitch Sanders manipulated the child's trust in his biological mother, either by recording or impersonating Jamie's voice, to ensure Oliver wouldn't resist effectively abandoning him without immediate detection." Connie gave a slight nod, her lips trembling. "It's true. He used to practice mimicking Oliver's mom's voice as a joke. I think that's what he used." At that moment, Oliver looked at his mother through the glass, placing his hand on the partition. Jamie placed her hand directly across from his. No words were spoken, just that look, meeting in the middle, like trying to mend a crack someone else had tried to break apart. The judge bowed his head, jotting down notes. Jamie returned to her seat, eyes glistening. Liam gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze as she sat. Then came the conclusion and sentencing you mentioned earlier, now carrying a deeper weight. It was no longer just about Mitch abandoning the boy. It was about calculated deception, deliberate manipulation that made a child believe his own mother had told him to stay behind. The judge lowered his head and scribbled into the case file. Jamie sat down again, eyes brimming. Liam gently squeezed her shoulder. Kate Morgan rose once more. We also have a statement from Connie Sanders confirming that it was her father who ordered Oliver's name to be left off the evacuation list. The judge turned to Connie. She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the floor. And finally, Kate concluded, we request the full termination of Mr. Mitch Sanders's parental rights over Oliver Marsh due to gross negligence, endangerment, and life-threatening misconduct. Langston objected, but had nothing new to present. Judge Dole adjusted his glasses, then looked across the courtroom. I've heard enough. He set the pen down. Full custody of Oliver Marsh is hereby granted to his biological mother, Jamie Marsh. Additionally, I am ordering the District Attorney's Office to open a criminal investigation into the organized abandonment of a minor, with potential endangerment to life. He paused, then turned his gaze to Connie, the girl still curled up in the back row of seats, no longer wearing that defiant look in her eyes. Considering that Miss Connie Sanders is a minor, currently without a legal guardian, and has fully cooperated with the authorities, the court approves Mrs. Jamie Marsh's request for temporary custody of the child. Jamie looked up. Tears still clung to her cheeks, but this time she nodded firmly. I'll raise them both, if Connie agrees. I don't want either of them to grow up carrying wounds left by adults. Judge Dole gave a quiet nod. Today, justice isn't just about bringing one person to light. It's about giving these children a real chance to grow up in love. This court is adjourned. Mitch sat frozen. Langston couldn't find a single word. Jamie broke down, sobbing. Liam steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. She whispered, as if still unsure it was real, I have my son back. Behind the glass, Oliver looked at his mother. And for the first time since all of this began, there was something in his eyes. Relief. The afternoon in Kerrville carried the scent of damp earth and soft sunlight after the rain. After the historic trial, the small town returned to its usual quiet rhythm, but something had shifted. It wasn't just that justice had been restored. It was that 3 people once cast out from their own family were now learning how to piece things back together. Jamie, Connie, and Oliver moved into a new apartment, provided with help from the community. The rooms were small, the walls still carried the fresh scent of paint, but it was neat, and it was warm. Jamie was starting from scratch every cup, every meal. She learned how to divide her time between the 2 children, different fathers, different scars. But now, one family. Liam stayed for a few days after the trial, too, fixing the jammed window, setting up a study desk, and installing a soft yellow light above the kitchen. Those days almost felt peaceful. Connie was quiet at first. She avoided eye contact with her mother, finished her meals in silence, and retreated to her room. She folded her clothes separately, like she didn't truly belong in the home yet. Jamie didn't push. She understood. Some wounds can't be touched. They can only be waited on. On Thursday evening, after Jamie finished setting the table, Connie didn't come down to eat. She knocked on her door. No response. The door wasn't locked, but the room was empty. On the desk was a folded piece of paper. Inside, in shaky handwriting, it read, "If I left, would you come looking for me?" Jamie froze. Her hands trembled as she read. Oliver stood beside her, panicked. "Where did she go, Mum?" Jamie didn't answer. She looked at Liam. He understood instantly and stepped forward to grab his coat. They split up. Jamie called every contact she could think of, while Liam drove past the library, the old bookshop, and the corner of the park Connie used to love. By nearly midnight, the 3 of them ended up back at the apartment door with no news. Oliver looked up at his mum, then turned to Liam, his voice barely a whisper. "I know a place." They both turned to him. "Connie once told me, If she ever left, she'd probably go to the first place where someone called her name. Where I waved to her, from the back of the ambulance. Jamie went still. The library. The car glided slowly along the stone-paved road in front of the Kerrville Library. The motion sensor light on the porch cast shadows across the wooden overhang. On the bench out front, someone sat curled up with their knees to their chest. Connie. Jamie stepped out first. She didn't call out, just walked over and opened her coat. "Are you cold?" Connie didn't answer, but when Jamie sat down beside her, the girl began to tremble, then slowly leaned her head onto her mother's shoulder. "I thought you were mad at me." Jamie gave her a gentle squeeze. "I was just sad that I didn't understand you sooner." In the distance, Liam stepped out of the car, carrying Oliver. The boy was still in his pajamas, clutching a stuffed bunny. Oliver looked at Connie, then held out a piece of paper. "Look, I drew you." Connie took it, a scribbled drawing of two people standing in front of a wide open door. The taller girl was holding the hand of a little boy. Above them, in crooked lettering, it read, "Everyone deserves to stay." Connie bit her lip. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but for the first time, she didn't look down. She looked straight at her little brother and nodded. The next morning, Connie came down for breakfast on her own. Jamie hadn't even called her yet, but the table was already set: 3 bowls, 3 sets of chopsticks. When Liam said goodbye to head off to another flood zone to help, Connie was the first to walk up and hug him. "Thank you for not letting anyone walk alone." Liam tousled her hair and smiled. "And never forget, the first one who called your name was Oliver." Oliver blushed, but held his sister's hand. A tiny squeeze, but enough to make someone stay. Days passed. The little family of 3 still lived in their small apartment. But now, every laugh rang true. Connie began sitting at the table with her younger brother. She guided Oliver as he colored, taught him how to fold paper. She smiled not often, but genuinely. As for Jamie, each time she stood at the sink washing dishes and saw the 2 children playing together in the living room, she would pause for a few seconds. Not because of the past, but because the present was real. And from the kitchen window, the Kerrville sunlight spilled in soft as the voice of a child who once asked, "If I left, would you come find me?" The answer, clearer than ever before, yes, I would, and I wouldn't come alone. The afternoon in Kerrville was as gentle as the hearts of its people. On the wooden notice board outside the town library, a bright yellow sign caught the eyes of passers-by. "A day for Oliver, see every child." It wasn't a grand festival, no fireworks, no flashy banners. Just a few rows of folding chairs set up under a bougainvillea trellis, a donation table with some glass jars, and a few trays of cinnamon rolls baked by the women's club. But for Jamie, it was the most meaningful event in her life since the day Connie was born. On the makeshift stage in front of the library, Nora, the journalist who had first brought Oliver's story to light, stood at the microphone. Her voice carried clearly, without fanfare. "We're not here today for a famous child. We're here for a child who once went unseen, and because of this family, he's invisible no more." Applause followed. A group of elementary school children brought up a donation box with the words, "Don't leave anyone behind." Jamie sat in the front row, Connie on her left, Oliver on her right. The boy clutched a half-finished drawing. Connie wore a pale blue dress her mother had picked, her hair tied up high. She looked more grown up now, so different from the little girl who used to sit curled up by the window. A hand touched Jamie's shoulder gently. Liam. He had made it just in time, his pickup truck still dusted with dried mud from the floodplain roads. In his hand, a wooden frame wrapped loosely in newspaper. Jamie smiled. No words were needed. His eyes said it all. Oliver looked up. "You're back," Liam bent down and ruffled the boy's hair. "I heard someone around here might be getting famous." All three laughed. Connie laughed too softly, but from the heart. Nora invited Connie to speak. The whole room was caught off guard, even Jamie, but Connie didn't decline. She stepped up to the podium, hands trembling, eyes scanning the rows of seats. "Most of you probably know who I am by now, but back then I used to think maybe no one would ever want to." She paused for a few seconds. Then, more clearly, she continued, "I used to think I'd done something wrong, that I didn't deserve a mum. But now, every morning when I wake up, Oliver's lying next to me, Mum's in the kitchen making milk, and Uncle Liam sometimes texts to remind me to eat breakfast properly, and I've realized you don't have to be perfect to be loved." Applause followed, not loud, but gentle, like reassurance. Jamie wiped away tears. Liam gave a small nod, lips pressed tightly together. As the ceremony neared its close, Oliver was invited to present a painting to the town library. Liam helped him place it inside a wooden frame. In the painting, two children stood under the roof of a house. In the distance, a tall figure holding an umbrella was bending down to shelter both of them. On the adult's jacket, a faint pencil mark read, "Mr. Liam." Nora leaned toward Oliver and asked, "Why did you draw him there?" Oliver thought for a moment, then replied, "Because he's the kind of person who doesn't look at your mistakes. He looks at who needs help." The room fell quiet. No one spoke because no one needed to. Evening settled in. Connie helped Jamie fold up chairs. Oliver ran around, collecting hugs from his classmates, and Liam stood at a distance. He didn't step forward, but his eyes followed everything. Jamie walked up to him. "You're not coming in?" Liam smiled. "No need. Your family's okay now." She looked at him. "We're okay, but someone still has to keep the light on." He nodded. "I won't go far, just continuing somewhere else." Before leaving, Liam handed her a wrapped picture frame for Oliver, so next time he can draw himself holding the umbrella for someone else. That night, after everyone was asleep, Connie quietly unwrapped Liam's frame. Underneath was a small handwritten note. "Everyone deserves to be called by name, whether it's the first time or the second." She sat there, in the soft glow of the nightlight, arms wrapped around the frame, and for the first time, slept in peace. 12 months after the trial, Kerrville no longer spoke of the case as a tragedy. They remembered it as a turning point, the day justice spoke, and a family began again. Jamie's tiny apartment had been replaced by a 2-story cream-colored house, purchased with help from a town-sponsored loan program. In the front yard stood a red maple tree planted by Oliver and Connie together. Every fall, the children would fight over who got to rake the leaves, only to end up hiding under the porch together with a book. Liam still came by. Not in a loud or showy way, his visits were quiet. A Saturday morning fixing the wooden staircase, an afternoon showing Connie how to shoot a bow in the backyard. Some days, he just sat in the kitchen sketching flood maps, ink smudging his hands, while telling silly stories that made Oliver laugh until he couldn't breathe. Jamie didn't call it love. She called it staying. And Liam had stayed in his own way. Connie still had nights when she woke up startled, but now she knew to walk across the hall to Oliver's room and knock 3 times on his door. As for Oliver, now 10 years old, he had started to change. His hair was trimmed neat. His voice carried a soft, breaking rasp. He would sometimes sit in silence, looking out toward the distant woods, where Liam had once pulled him from the mud and cold water. One afternoon, he tugged Jamie onto the porch. "Mum, I want to be a soldier when I grow up." Jamie paused. "Because of Uncle Liam?" Oliver nodded. "I want to be like him. But not just saving people. I want to see the ones who need saving." Jamie squeezed her son's hand. She didn't stop him. She only said, "Then be a soldier, but one with a heart." That spring, Connie wrote an essay that won first place in the county-wide competition. The topic was, "What makes a family?" She wrote, "Family doesn't have to share blood. Family is the person who doesn't walk away when you mess up, the one who sits with you in silence when you're sad and laughs loud when you're okay. My family has a mother who once stood alone, an elder brother who used to be hidden, and a soldier not sharing a last name, but sharing the same eyes when they talk about one another, eyes that never look away." Not everyone is born into a perfect family, but the story of Jamie, Oliver, Connie, and Liam reminds us family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's simply about someone choosing to stay when you're at your weakest, someone choosing to believe in you when the world doesn't, someone choosing to hold you, even when you can't hold yourself. If you've ever felt invisible in this life, remember this: the first person to truly see you might not be family by blood, but family by heart. Have you ever had someone see you in a moment that mattered? Has anyone ever stayed by your side when everything else was falling apart? I'd love to hear your story in the comments, because maybe your story will become the light someone else needs to find their way. And how are you doing lately? If today has been a hard day, I hope you know there are still people who care about you. Like I do right now, reading these words to you.